So today we start a new tutorial about Google Analytics API. And this is a long tutorial, so I'll break it down in many videos and I will create another playlist for this specific tutorial. If you worked before with Google Analytics, you know that this is a dashboard which shows you the information about your website's traffic, like organic visitors, non-organic visitors, from where your visitors came on your website, or what they searched on Google, and on what links they clicked before they arrived to your website, and any other information that Google Analytics provides about your website. But sometimes you just want to check a specific kind of information really quick. Let's say you want to check the non-organic visitors for the past 6 months. And to do that, you have to go to your Google Analytics dashboard and log in there and then look for this kind of information on that dashboard. But using Google Analytics API, you can pull this kind of information, you can pull this data and show it on your current dashboard. Let's say you have a website and you have a dashboard on your website. You just use Google Analytics API and pull this information and show it on that dashboard. So you don't have to log in to your Google Analytics dashboard every time when you want to check this kind of information. Let me show you an example of a dashboard. So I have right now a dashboard and there's a login form. Let me log in really quick and I will show you an example. It takes time right now because it pulls the information from Google, and I have another API there that works right now. That's why it's so slow. But you will want to save this information. After you pull this information, you'll want to save it in a database and refresh this information maybe every week or 2 times a week, so your website won't slow down. Alright, so we will focus just on the first chart, and we have here organic visits, non-organic visits, and we have this information for the past 7 months. And we pull this information using Google Analytics API, and we will use the PHP programming language to do that. In this video we will build the login form for our dashboard, and I will show you how this dashboard looks. I already built it before I recorded this video because I just want to save time, but I will go through all those PHP files and I will explain each function, what it does, and how those PHP files require each other, and all the stuff you have to know or you need to know to build this dashboard too. So my dashboard, my login form looks like this. I send the data through the post method and I use Ajax to do that. And if I click on the login form right now on the submit button, you can see that there is a message. There's an error message which says that all fields are required. And if, for example, I write something here, for let's say a wrong email and a wrong password, and I click login button, it tells me that the login failed. But in case I write here my email and my password, it redirects me to index.php. And now when I access again this index.php, it shows me just the hi word, because the Ajax actually redirected me to index.php again. But when I went through Ajax, the Ajax called the PHP file, so that PHP file had a function which sent me or gave me 2 cookies. So I have right now 2 cookies in the browser. That's why it shows me on index.php this hi, because it means I'm logged in already. I will explain you later and you'll understand. So to get started, just go to your PHP my admin and create a database. My database is Google right now. I named it Google because we will work with Google API. And then in this database I have a users table. And the structure of this users table is like this. I have an ID column, which is the primary key, and this is an auto increment column, and then I have the email, password, session, first name, and the last name. And you choose the same type here. For ID it's integer, and then for other columns is varchar, and you can also choose the same codification. Now after you are done with the table, insert a new user. As you see, I have a user right now, and where you see here the password and the session, pay attention to the password, because it looks like it's a too long password. It's too long than the password that I used to write on the login form. And this is because my password is encoded using the MD5 codification. So to do that, let me explain you. There is a website online where you can do this stuff. It calls md5hashgenerator.com, and here my password right now from this database it's port. So this is my password right now. If I click generate, it gives me a hash. So I have a hash. This is the MD5. This is my password port, and this is the codification for my password using MD5. So I have this MD5 codification, and then copy this hash and I paste it here and I generate it again. And now the final hash I have, this should be the same as my password. So yeah, just do the same thing for your password and then insert it in your table. And after you are done with your database, I'm gonna explain you all the PHP files. So my main directory right now is htdocs because I work with XAMPP, and the main folder where I work right now is the htdocs. And here I have few PHP files and few folders. Follow me because I have an order on creating all those PHP files. So I will tell you which file is the first one, which one is the second one, because I want you to understand the logic of this script. So the first file you want to create should be config.php. And now this PHP file looks like this. I have the time zone here, and then I create another class which is connect, and this class extends the PDO object. So basically in this PHP file is the connection to the database, because as you see here I have the localhost and then the database name, which is Google in my case, and then the user is root, and I don't have any password for my root user, and I just leave it empty right there. Now the next thing you want to create is the core folder. Create a core folder right now and then open it and create two other folders. The first one is Ajax and then the second one classes. And after you are done, open your classes folder and create another PHP file which is user.class.php and then open it. So my user.class.php looks like this. By the way, I do recommend you to copy all these PHP files because you will understand better when you write by yourself this code. I will also leave a link to GitHub where you can find all these PHP files, but if you want to understand it better, you have to write all this code by yourself. Like this, you'll memorize it and you will understand it better. So in this user class, we require the config.php file that you just created. This is the first PHP file you created. This is the connection to the database. And then we create a new class which is user. And this class has few functions. The first function is dashboard, and this function just shows hi. And then the next function is generate code. This function generates a random code which is the session for each user, and this session we will save it in the database and also in the user's cookie. So copy this function like this, and then we will come back to this function. You will see where we call this function, and you will understand it, how it works and where we need to call this function. The next function is a login form, and this function returns an HTML code. I have few div classes here. Just copy everything as you see here because I will show you my CSS file as well, and you'll copy all my code from there. I have a div class form block, and then I have a title ID which is dashboard, and then I have a body class, and then the login response. In this div, the Ajax sends the answer, or here we can see the result after the Ajax called that PHP file where we have our validation for the information from our form. And then on the next line we have the form tag, and this form tag has an ID, and this ID is very important because that's how the Ajax function knows from which form it needs to get the data, or yeah, something like that, with what form the Ajax is working. So write the ID. As you see here, there's an action. We don't have an action because we don't refresh the page, we don't access any other page. And then we send this data through the method post, the post method, and then we have two fields. First one is the email and the second one is the password. And then we have our button, which is login. Alright, this is just an HTML code and it appears on index.php. We will create that file later and I will explain. I'll come back to this PHP file and I will still explain most of these functions. But for now I just wanted to write all these functions. Okay, the next function is check data, and this functions is the validation for our email and for our password. As you see, we have two parameters for this function, the email and then the password. We got these parameters and we assign to the DB variable the connection to the database. We just create a new object which is connect from our config.php file, and then we check if there is any email, if there is anything inside of our variable, of our email variable, and if there is anything inside of our password variable. Then we filter the email and the password. So we filter them using few PHP functions. These are predefined functions. For example, trim. This function removes the spaces before and after the email. Let's say the user, before they write an email, they just leave few spaces and then they write their email, and then after the email they also left 2 or 3 spaces or just 1 space by mistake. And this function is gonna remove all those spaces. And then we have strip slashes. This is in case the user wrote their slash or 1 or 2 slashes. So this function is gonna filter all those slashes, because if a user entered slashes in the email field, that means that user has a bad idea. He wants to do something bad on our website. So that's why we should filter those slashes. And then we have HTML special chars, which will codificate. This is gonna encode the HTML code in case the user entered HTML tags or something like that, because we don't want to allow user to enter any other kind of information than just the email. So they should be able to write just an email, and they have to write just an email in order to log into our website. Alright, our password, we do the same thing for our password. We use the trim, strip slashes, and then HTML special chars. And pay attention here, I used the double MD5 to encode my password. As I told you, using this website, this website does the same thing. We did the same thing here, but PHP has a predefined function which also can do this stuff. So just write everything like as you see here, and then we check again. We check if our email is empty or if our password is empty. Then we will show this message here. We will show error, all fields are required. Otherwise, we have a query here, and this query will select the user which will have the email and the password which came from that login form. And we prepare here, we use PDO, so we prepare the query and then we execute it. And then after that we fetch this data to our info variable, and then we check if our user variable has any value or any information as a result of our query to the database, because we were looking for a user. And then if we found any user in the database with that email and with that password, then it means our user variable should have a user there. But here we check if there are 0 columns, 0 rows in our user variable. That means that we don't have any user with that same email and the password, which means there is no user with the email and the password that user entered in that form, in the login form. Otherwise, it means there is a user and we found that user, and then we just assign to our hash variable a generated code. If you remember, we had just this generate code function right here, which generates a code. So we want to get a code of 10 digits length, and we encode this code using the MD5 function as well. And we save all this stuff, we assign all this stuff to our hash variable. And after that, we just update the user which has the ID we found in our first query. So we update the user session, and then we assign to that, or we save in that session column this hash generated code. And after that, we create two new cookies. The first one is the ID, and the second one is the session. So for the ID cookie, we assign the user ID, and then for the session cookie, we give the session that we saved in the database. And after all this stuff is done, we just redirect the user to index.php. And it may be confusing for you right now about this refreshing, or about is redirecting to index.php, because you may think again that we are already on index.php. Why do we redirect the user to index.php again? We will come back here and you will understand, because in index.php I have an if there, and that if checks if the user is online, then it will show the login form. If the user doesn't have any cookie, then it will show the login form. And then if the user has the right cookie, the right ID cookie and the session cookie, then it will show that dashboard function. We will come back here and you will understand also better if you didn't understand right now. The next function is login. So this function checks if the user is online or not. And we assign to our DB variable the connection to the database, and then we check if the user has the cookie ID cookie, and if the user has the cookie session, then we assign to our ID variable the ID from its cookie ID. And we also use the intval predefined PHP function, because intval filters if, for example, if somebody wrote something in the cookie, because you can change your cookie. If you have a cookie, you can change it on any website. And in our case, we allow in our cookie ID just the user ID. We don't want the user to have any other letter there. So in case they wrote something in the cookie ID, and of course they are trying to do something bad on the website, but using this intval, we just filter all that data and we get just the integer number from that cookie, which makes it safe. And after that, we just select the ID and the session from our users table, where the ID is equal to the ID from the user's cookie. So we just select the user which has the ID from the cookie, and we fetch this data to the user data variable, and then we check. Right here is very important. We check here after we selected the user. We have the ID in the session right now, and we also have the ID in the session from the cookie. And now we check, is this session that we found in the database different than the session from user's cookie, or is this user ID we found in the database different than the ID that user has in the cookie. You see, also use inval here. Then if they're different, if the session is different if the session from database is different than the session from cookie, or if the ID from the database is different than the ID from cookie, it means that user has a wrong data. It has a wrong ID and wrong session in the cookie. So in this case, we just remove those two cookies, and this function returns false. Otherwise, if those data are equal, then this function is gonna return true. That's how we find out if the user is logged in or not. And here on the 65th line, where we check the first time if there is any cookie in the browser, we check here if the user has a cookie ID or if the user has a session ID. then we do all this stuff. Otherwise we return false as well, because the user doesn't have any cookie in the browser. Alright, that's it for this PHP file. Just save it, and let's go to the next one. Let me go to the next one. So let's go back to our core folder, and here you see we have two PHP files. The first one is header, and then the second one is footer. Let's open the header.php file. I mean, you create it. I'm gonna open it, and you copy all this code you see here. On the first line, we require the PHP file we just created is the user class, and then we have an HTML code here. We have the head section, and this is the title. We have our icon style. We call here the jQuery because we will work with Ajax, and then we have another JavaScript which we will create later. After you created this header.php file, save it, and then create another PHP file which is footer.php, and in this file we close the body tag and the HTML tag. Alright, when you are done with those two PHP files, let's go back to the main directory. You have it, and in that main directory we should create now the index.php file. So create a index.php file, and in this index.php file let's require the header we just created on the previous step, and then we assign to our user variable a new object which is user, because if you remember, in our header.php we require here the user class, and then in our user class we also have we require the connection to the database. So if you require the header.php in your index.php, it means you already have required all those two files, which is user class and then config.php, so you don't have to require them again in this index.php file. And we just assign to our user variable a new object, and then we check here if login function from the user class returns true. If this function returns true, which is right here, if this function returns true, then we show the dashboard function, which is the first function we wrote, this one. So if this function returns true in our index.php, we show this function. We show the result of this function, or what this function outputs or returns. Otherwise, else, we show the login form function from the user class. So we go back to our user class and we show the login form. As I told you, if the user is logged in, we show the dashboard function. If the user isn't logged in, we show him the login form. And then here we require the footer.php file. Alright, after you're done, save this PHP file, and let's go back to our main folder. And here I have the JS folder. Let's create a JS folder, and then in this folder I have a JavaScript file. Create a JavaScript file as you see in my folder here. Open it, and you should write all this code into your JavaScript file. So you see here, this is the log form, this is the form ID, which is here. I was talking about that. And then we have the login response, which is right here. And then we have our Ajax, and this Ajax works only when we submit the button, when we click on the submit button from the log form ID. And when we click on that button, this Ajax function calls this PHP file, which we didn't create it yet. We will create it, and we send the data through the post method, and the data type is HTML. You can also write here. It also depends on what kind of data your login.php will send you or will output. So I just put HTML here, which works with text and with any other kind of data I will need to output using this login.php file. And then here we just show the login. This is before it gets a result from our login.php, and then in case of success we just reset our form, we reset those fields, and then otherwise we just, it's an error log here, you can check it on your browser. Alright, after you are done with this PHP file, save it, and let's go ahead and create another PHP. Let's go ahead and create this login PHP file. So let's go back to our main folder, and let's open our core folder, and let's open the Ajax folder, and in this folder we have a login.php file, which is this file right here from as you saw in our JavaScript. Let's create this login.php file and copy this code. So we have here a PHP file, and actually this line here checks if this file is called by Ajax function or if this file is called directly by a user writing there on the browser URL. If somebody is trying to access this file directly, then we will show just why did you come here, because we don't want users to be able to access this PHP file, because this file should be accessed by the Ajax function only. Because if somebody is trying to access this PHP file, it means they have bad ideas. They want to do something bad. So we should stop that. That's how we stop the direct access to this PHP file. And we allow only Ajax to be able to access this file. Alright. On the 7th line, we require the user class.php. And then we assign to our user variable a new object, which is the user object, and then here we call the check data function from our user class PHP file, which is right here. This is the function we call in our login.php, and we send to this function the email and the password. And as I told you, we send the data through the post method. That's how we get the email. We get it from the post method again. We get it from the post method. And this function checks if there is any user with that password with that email, then and if everything, like for example, let's say somebody wrote an email and the password, and there is a such user with a such password and email. After that, after we create 2 cookies, I told you the user is gonna be redirected to index.php file. So as you see here, on the first time when they come to index.php, they will see this login form. And then after they click submit, when they click submit, here the Ajax calls the login.php file, and this login.php file calls the check data function from our user class, which is this one. And if there is a user like that, then we create 2 cookies and we redirect the user to index.php. So we make the user to go to index.php again, and now when they come to these PHP files again, they already have a cookie, and if they have the right cookie, we will show the dashboard function. We will show the data that this dashboard function will return. Alright, let's go back to our main folder. And here I have a style folder. Let's open this style folder, and here I have another img folder, and I have a style css. I'm gonna open this style css, and you can copy if you want all this code from here, if you want to have the same background and the same colors. And after you are done with this file, you just stop the video and copy this code, and when you are done, just continue the video and then stop it again and copy again. That's how I used to do when I was watching different tutorials. I told you I will leave the link to GitHub where you can find all those PHP files, but still, I do recommend you to write it by yourself because you'll remember, you'll memorize it, and you will understand it better when you write it by yourself. I have few images here. Those images, if you want the same images, then you can find them on GitHub. Alright, that's it. Save this file, and let's go back to our, this is my img directory, so that's the images I have right now. You can find them on GitHub. Let's go back to our main folder, and the last PHP file we want to create is the exit.php. Let's open this file, and this file looks like this. I have here set cookie function. So basically this file removes our cookies from the browser, removes the ID cookie and the session cookie, and then after that it just redirects the user to index.php again, which means that in this case, if the user access this exit.php file, it means they lost their cookie, and when they go back to index.php, they will see right now the login form, so they will have to log in again. So if I go right now to my URL and change here exit.php and I click enter, you see how fast it redirected me to index.php. It removed my cookie and it redirected me to index.php again, where I should write my email and password to be able to log into the website. Alright guys, that's it for this video. If you have any questions, you just leave a comment and I will answer. I will help you if you have any difficulties with this code and you don't understand maybe something, or maybe I missed something. Just let me know and I will answer and I will help you. And thank you very much for your attention, and see you in the next video. Please, this video is very important. You should understand how it works, because on this dashboard function where we have our user class PHP, where you see this dashboard function, here actually we will show the data, the data from Google Analytics. So we will learn how to use Google API and how to use their library, because they have a PHP library, and I will tell you how to use it and how to get different kind of data and all that stuff. Alright, see you in the next video.